Chapter 5 Barbarossa. The shop where so much of the thief lord's loot had been turned into money lay in a small alley not far from the Basilica San Marco. Next door to it was a pasticceria with pastries and cakes of all shapes and sizes in its windows. Come on, Prosper grumbled at Riccio, who was pressing his nose against the shop window. Reluctantly, Riccio let himself be dragged away, his head still swimming with the scent of sweet almonds. Barbarossa's shop didn't exactly smell as nice. From the outside, it didn't look any different from all the other junk shops in Venice. The glass front was painted with ornate letters: Ernesto Barbarossa, Ricordi di Venezia, Souvenirs of Venice. In the window itself, there were vases and candlesticks surrounded by little gondolas and glass insects laid out on threadbare velvet drapes. Thin china plates were crammed next to piles of old books, and pictures in tarnished silver frames lay next to cheap paper masks. Barbarossa stocked whatever anyone could desire, and if something particular wasn't on show, then the Redbeard would get hold of it, by crooked means if necessary. Dozens of glass bells chimed above his head as Prosper opened the shop door. Inside, a few tourists stood among the crammed shelves, whispering as solemnly as if they were in a church. They seemed awed, either by the chandeliers that hung from the dark ceiling, or by the countless candles that burned everywhere in their heavy holders. With bowed heads, Prosper and Riccio pushed past the tourists. A man was holding a statuette that Mosca had sold to the Redbeard 2 weeks before. When Prosper saw the price tag underneath its plinth, he nearly knocked over a large statue in the center of the shop. Do you remember how much Barbarossa paid us for that figure there? He whispered to Riccio. No, you know I can't remember numbers. Well, that number has now got two more zeros on the end of it, Prosper whispered. Not a bad deal for the Redbeard, is it? He stepped up to the counter and rang the bell next to the register. Riccio made faces at the masked lady smiling down at them from a large painting on the wall. This was his regular joke, for behind the lady's mask was a peephole through which Barbarossa kept an eye on his customers. A few seconds later, the beaded curtain behind the counter tinkled into life, and Ernesto Barbarossa appeared in person. The Redbeard was a very fat man, but Prosper was always amazed at how nimbly he moved through his crammed shop. I hope you brought some decent goods this time, the man murmured disdainfully, but the boys noticed how he stared at the bag in Prosper's hands, like a hungry cat eyeing up a fat, juicy mouse. I think you'll be interested, Prosper answered. Riccio said nothing. He was staring at Barbarossa's ginger beard as if he expected something to crawl out of it at any moment. What are you looking at, you little ferret? The Redbeard cursed. Riccio began to stutter. I was just wondering whether it was real. The color, I mean. Of course it's real. Are you saying I dye my beard? Barbarossa growled at him. You gnomes get some strange ideas. He stroked his beard with his fat ringed fingers. Then he nodded discreetly in the direction of the couple of tourists that were still standing by the shelves, whispering to each other. I'll get rid of them as quickly as possible, he muttered. Go ahead into my office, and don't even think of touching anything. Clear? Prosper and Riccio nodded. Then they disappeared behind the beaded curtain. Barbarossa's office looked completely different from his shop. Here there were no chandeliers, no candles, or glass insects. The windowless room was lit by a neon light and was completely bare, except for a big desk with a massive leather armchair behind it, two guest chairs, and a few high shelves stuffed with meticulously labeled boxes. A poster from the Museo di Accademia hung on the white wall behind the desk. There was also an upholstered bench placed underneath Barbarossa's peephole. Riccio climbed onto it and peered into the shop. You've got to see this prop, he whispered. The Redbeard is purring around those tourists like a fat tomcat. I don't think anyone has ever escaped his shop without buying something, or without paying far too much for it. Prosper placed the bag with Scipio's loot on one of the chairs and looked around. He definitely dyes it, Riccio murmured without taking his eyes from the people. I've bet Hornet 3 comics that he does. Barbarossa's head was as bald as a glitter ball. His beard, however, grew thick and frizzy and was the color of fox fur. I think there's a bathroom behind that door, whispered Riccio. Have a look and see if he's got any hair dye in there. If I have to. Prosper crossed to the narrow passage and put his head around another door. Wow, there's more marble in here than in the Doge's palace, Riccio heard him say. This is just about the classiest bathroom I've ever seen. Riccio pressed his eye against the peephole. Prosper, get out of there, he called under his breath. The Redbeard is finished with the customers, and he's locking the door. He dies it, Prosper called. The bottle's right here, next to his smelly aftershave. Ugh, it stinks. Should I dye a bit of toilet paper as evidence? No, get out of there. Riccio jumped off the bench. Quick, he's coming back, darn it! The beaded curtain announced Barbarossa as he entered the office. Prosper and Riccio were sitting in front of his desk, wearing their most innocent faces. I'm going to have to deduct the money for a glass beetle, the burly Redbeard announced as he let himself fall into a vast armchair. Your little brother, he gave Prosper a disapproving look, broke it last time. He did not, Prosper protested. Oh, yes, he did, Barbarossa replied without looking at him. He took a pair of glasses from his drawer. So what have you got for me today? I hope it's not just fake gold and inferior silver spoons. With a stony face, Prosper emptied his bag onto the desk. Barbarossa leaned forward. He took the sugar tongs, the medallions, and the magnifying glass one by one, and turned them in his pudgy fingers. He inspected them from every angle. The boys watched him closely. His face showed nothing. He picked each item up, put it back down, and picked it up again, then pushed it aside, looked at it again, until the boys were scraping their feet impatiently on the floor. Finally, Barbarossa leaned back with a sigh and put his glasses on the desk. He stroked his beard as if he were stroking the fur of a small animal. Do you want to tell me what you want for them, or shall I give you my best offer? He asked. Prosper and Riccio exchanged a quick glance. Give me your offer, came Prosper's answer. He tried to look as if he knew exactly what Scipio's loot was worth. My offer. Barbarossa paused. He put his fingertips together and closed his eyes. Well, I admit there are a couple of quite decent items here this time, so I'll offer you. He opened his eyes again. 100,000 lyre. And I'm still doing you a favor. Riccio held his breath. He imagined all the cakes he could buy for 100,000 lyre. Mountains of cakes. But Prosper shook his head. He looked Barbarossa straight in the eye and said, No, 500,000, or the deal is off. For a split second, Barbarossa couldn't hide his surprise, but he regained his composure and conjured an expression of honest outrage. Outrage. Have you lost your mind, boy? He bellowed. Here I am, making you a generous offer, far too generous, and you go and make outrageous demands. Tell the thief lord never again to send such impertinent kids if he wants to continue doing business with Ernesto Barbarossa. Riccio looked worried, but Prosper just got up and silently started putting the loot back into his bag. Barbarossa watched him calmly, but when Prosper reached for the sugar tongs, he grabbed his hand so quickly that the boy gave a start. You're a smart fellow, a bit too smart for my taste. The thief lord and I have done good business so far, and so I'll give you 400,000 lyre for the lot, although most of it is junk. I like the tongs. Tell the thief lord if he offers me more stuff like that, we will definitely stay in business together, even if he insists on using such rude errand boys. He looked at Prosper with a mixture of anger and respect. One more thing, he cleared his throat. Ask the thief lord if he would take on a job. The boys looked at one another. A job? Barbarossa shuffled a few papers together. One of my most important clients is looking for a talented man who will, let's say, fetch something for him. Something my client wants rather badly. As far as I have gathered, the item is here, in Venice. Should be child's play for someone. Barbarossa twisted his face into a scornful smile. Who likes to call himself the thief lord, shouldn't it? Prosper didn't answer. The Redbeard had never seen Scipio, and so he probably thought he was dealing with an adult. He didn't have the faintest idea that the thief lord was just as young as his messengers. That didn't seem to bother Riccio, who said, Sure, we'll ask him. Excellent. Barbarossa leaned back in his armchair with a smug smile. He was holding the sugar tongs in his hands, tenderly stroking their curved handles. If he wants to take on the job, tell him to send one of you with his answer. I will then arrange a meeting with my client. He lowered his voice. The payment will be very generous. My client has assured me of that. As Riccio said, we'll ask him, Prosper repeated, but now we would like to have our money. Barbarossa burst out laughing. Riccio nearly jumped out of his chair. Yes, yes, you will get your money. the Redbeard panted. Don't worry, but get out of my office. Do you really think I would open my safe with you little thieves watching me? What do you think? Will Scipio take the job? Riccio whispered to Prosper as they leaned against the counter waiting for Barbarossa. It's probably best not to tell him about it at all, Prosper answered. He looked intently at the portrait of the masked lady. And why not? Prosper shrugged. Don't know. It's just a feeling. I don't trust the Redbeard. Just then, Barbarossa pushed himself through the tinkling beaded curtains. There you are, he said. He held out a thick wad of bills to them. But don't get robbed on your way home now. All those tourists out there with their cameras and bulging wallets attract thieves like flies. The boys ignored the old crook's grin. Prosper took the money and looked at it, uncertain what to do. No, you don't need to count it, Barbarossa said, as if he had guessed the boy's thoughts. It's all there. I only deducted the glass beetle your brother broke last time. Sign the receipt here. You can write, I hope. Prosper just scowled and scribbled a name on the pad. He threw the empty bag over his shoulder and walked to the door. Come on, Riccio. Let me know as soon as possible about that job, Barbarossa shouted after them. Will do, Prosper answered and then pulled the shop door shut behind him. He was determined not to mention a word of it to Scipio.